Tomorrow on March 6th at 9 a.m. Eastern, 6 a.m. Pacific, Microcenter will have the new AMD Radeon RX 9070 and RX 9070 XT GPUs. We weren't sure which GPU we wanted to focus on for today's build, so we figured, why not do two builds in one video? So we're going to do a build for the 9070, and we're also going to do a build for the 9070 XT at the same time. Now for the 9070, we paired this off with our 7800 X3D bundle. So that's going to be with that 7800 X3D CPU, 32 gigabytes of memory, as well as this really awesome Asus TUF Gaming motherboard. For the RX 9070 XT, we wanted to go all out for this one. So we have a 9950X CPU from AMD, paired this off with an Aorus X870E Master, and that's going to be a really awesome motherboard, as well as 64 gigabytes of memory. So this is going to be a really awesome build. For the 9070 build, all in, everything here, you're looking at about $1,500. And then for the 9070 XT build, all in, you're looking at about $2,500. So let's dive in and start building. Okay, so the first thing that you want to do when you're going to build any PC is a lot of prep work. So I have this table here because I'm going to stage everything and open all of the boxes first. The first step is really just preparing your work area. You don't want to do this on the floor. Definitely don't want to do this on tile because the glass from your case, like this has glass here on this case, that can shatter if it touches tile. So you got to be careful there. So if you have a large kitchen table or a large desk or anything like that, or if you have multiple desks, that's the best way to set out. Now for today's build, we're going all out, right? We're doing two builds simultaneously, and so that's double the work. So that's double the prep over here. So I'm going to keep one pile over here and then one pile over there since I already have the GPU open. Now the cool thing about these GPUs is the price. AMD announced that the prices start at $549 for the 9070 and $599 for the 9070 XT. Both of which have 16 gigabytes of VRAM, and it's the new RDNA 4 architecture from AMD, and that's an incredible value. So these cards are positioned between the 7900 GRE and the 7900 XTX, so you can expect 1440 gaming, 4K gaming, some good ray trace performance, and honestly there's going to be some pretty good AI features as well, but we'll dive more into that later. So I have all my boxes assembled here. I'm just going to start opening everything. And since I'm doing two builds simultaneously, I'm going to do them kind of side by side. So I'm going to prep the motherboards for both. First I'll do one, then I'll do the other. So that means we're going to get our CPUs, our SSDs, and our memory all set up. And then we can dive into all the rest. Cable management is the part that I'm actually kind of dreading for this. You know, the rest of it, I think it's going to be pretty easy. Cable management, that's going to be the part that's going to, it's twice the cables, twice the cable management. All right, so now we're at the workbench and I have everything set up. I got a bunch of the parts laid out on the table behind me, but here I have the motherboard, RAM, and CPU for both builds. So why don't we take a look at this? I also have my Meta Ray-Bans on right now so I can get some POV footage. So why don't we take a look at the motherboard? Now, this is the Aorus X870E Master, and this guy is going to be really great and paired with our 9950X. So you can see right here, that's where our CPU is going to go. We have our DIMM slots, so obviously you want to make sure you go A2, B2 first, and we have all of our connectors here. So front panel is going to be connected there. We have our USB headers here, system fan headers all over the place, plenty of RGB, front audio, and then obviously our power UPS connector for the CPU, and VRMs, big heatsink on this guy. So this is big and chunky. This is going to keep this running really well, and really big heatsink for the SSD. I mean, look at this. That's a big heatsink. Not bad. And it's got a thermal pad on there too, so that's going to keep it running nice and cool. It's got this nice little latch for quick release, goes right there. So all in all, this is going to be a really good motherboard paired off with this. It does have a PCIe 5 slot, which the 9070 XT, that's going to be PCIe 5 as well, so that's going to work really great. So obviously I'm pairing this off with the Ryzen 9 9950X, 16 cores, 32 threads on this guy. I mean, this is going to be a really intense PC. And the idea is I kind of want to balance this out between gaming, but also maybe productivity as well. I want to try out what we could do for video editing and some other use cases beyond gaming. So that's why I went with a 9950X. Now, you could also easily go with a 9800X3D paired off with the 9070, and that would be a really great gaming PC. But 9950X, I think for productivity, that's a really cool way to go. We also paired this off with the SK Hynix Platinum P41 SSD. That's going to be a blazing fast SSD that's going to work really great. 2 terabyte capacity. We also have the Corsair Vengeance DDR5 6000 kit. So this is going to be a really, really good RAM kit to go with this. So first thing we're going to do is get our CPU in. And again, this is the AMD Ryzen 9 9950X. So 16 cores, 32 threads. This is going to work wonderfully. Let's get a quick shot of that one. So, just going to take our latch up right there. Pop that off. This is just going to go in nice and easy. I always like to match it up to the bottom lip there because there's a notch right at the bottom. Perfect. Good fit. It's going to pop right off. There we go. CPU's installed and all set. Next up, I'm going to go for memory, and we have to make sure that we take the stickers off on this one because this does have stickers on the heatsink. Look at that. Both sides? Not just the front side. Right, it's going to be a good memory kit to pair off with this. A2, B2. Oh, wait. Oh, there we go. A2, B2. Just going to fit right in. Pressure on both sides. There we go. And all set. Both sides fully clicked. I always like to triple check this part because sometimes one of the sides might not click fully and it might not be completely flush. And when you try to boot this guy and you're wondering, why isn't it booting? That's why, because this is offset ever so slightly. More stickers. Look at that. So I went with this motherboard, not just because it's a really great motherboard to pair with the CPU and GPU, but also because of the aesthetics. You can see some of the rainbow holographic effects here. So we have an Aorus GPU. This is the 9070 XT, and aesthetically, this matches really, really well to this motherboard. So I wanted to keep it kind of cohesive within the Gigabyte brand. So that paired off with the Corsair RAM, I think is going to look really, really nice. It's not going to be full crazy RGB, and I'll show you what else we're putting together here, but it's going to have just enough that's going to look real clean. But I really like the look of this here. That's going to look fantastic. So I'll put this GPU back there for now. And cool. Last thing we have to do is really just the SSD. There we go. So SK Hynix Platinum P41. This is a 2 terabyte capacity. And this guy is going to be blazing fast. Has a really good memory controller. Highly recommended. This is definitely one of our more popular SSDs. Just going to place the boxes on the side. So latch right there. That pops right off. I'm going to remove this bottom sticker. Then obviously we have a sticker right here for the thermal pad. And the thermal pad is kind of funny. It has this little glitter effect. All right, so this is an easy one. This one's just going to slide right in. A little quick latch there. Perfect. It's in place, held down. And then this guy has 2 little screws that it notches onto there. And there we go. And that's really it in terms of prep for the motherboard. Might swap these out for the cooler. I have to double check. So I'm going with an AIO for this build. But why don't I start prep on this motherboard first before I start messing with the cooling buckets? Okay, so for our second motherboard, we went with the 7800X3D bundle. Now that's going to be your 7800X3D CPU, 8 cores, 16 threads, and that expanded L3 cache. Also comes with 32 gigabytes of G.Skill's FlareX DDR5 6000 memory. So this is going to be a really good pairing. And then obviously we have the Asus TUF Gaming B650E Wi-Fi motherboard. So you can see here, we have the gray and black different memory slots, so A2, B2 again, those are the ones that we're going to want to do. See all of our headers, so fan header up there, or our AIO pump. And then we have our USB, power, we have our EPS power up here, and then obviously front panel, all of our SATA ports right there, USB, some RGB headers, that's going to be our front audio. Very cool. Okay, this one's going to be very straightforward, so we're going to start the CPU. Now for this build, this one is more of a mid-range gaming PC. So the bundle paired off with the 9070 at MSRP, it is a really good value that you can get to get really good performance. I mean, you can still expect 1440p gaming, and that's going to be awesome. Let's see what we have here. 7800X3D. Take a close look at that CPU. And again, I'm going to do the same. I just like to put it right on that bottom lip, get the notch matched up, and it just drops right in. Very, very easy. Put the latch down. Pops off, and we're good to go. Okay, so CPU set. We're gonna move on to memory. All right, so memory set, A2, B2. This is our G.Skill DDR5 6000 memory. So this is gonna be pretty straightforward. Just line it up. There we go, good contact. Same thing here, just gonna line it up. Very cool. All right, memory set, and now our SSD. Now for this one, we went with a 1 terabyte. This is an inland SSD, TN470. So this is a 1 terabyte capacity, which is a pretty good start for this level of a gaming PC. For this one, we're gonna need our screwdriver, get the heat sink off right there. Cool. So this is our inland 1 terabyte TN470. So really good value SSD. Fits right in. You have your little latch there. Just gonna take this off. And just line this up to the screw holes. There we go. All right, so we are set on motherboard number 2. So now we can move on. And I'm thinking I want to do some prep. How do I want to tackle this? So usually when I'm doing one build, I know exactly like what I'm going to do next, but now that I'm doing 2, I'm wondering, should I just do one case at a time? And then I'm just going to swap between them? Or should I just do one fully start to finish and then jump back and then start to finish? All right, let's see where we end up. Well, first, let me just take off all of these stickers. All right, cool. So both motherboards are prepped. I have one that is going to be an AIO, one that is going to be air-cooled. For the air-cooled, usually I would put it on now, but I like to just do it after I put the motherboard into the case, just to give me some extra room to reach those EPS connectors and any other connectors, because that's going to get a little bit snug. Let's talk about our cases for a second. So for our 9070, paired off with the 7800X3D, I went with a Fractal North, and this is the black and walnut version with the tempered glass. So this is going to work out really, really well. I splurged a little bit on the case, but everything all in, at least for the 9070 build, still came in at around $1,500. So that's pretty good. I could have saved a couple of bucks maybe if I went with a cheaper case, but I like this one a lot. I think this one's really pretty. And this case is great because it has the front fans. There we go. Already built in. I did get one extra fan for the exhaust here, and that'll give us the airflow that we need. So I'm just gonna prep both cases. Ooh, it's a giant silica pack. Garbage can's over there. Let's see if I can hit it. Nope, not even, I just hit the light. And that is why I don't play basketball much. So for this one, Fractal North with an air cooler is going to do us perfectly fine. I really like the Fractal North, obviously, for the aesthetics, but it's actually kind of nice to build into, and it gives you plenty of extra space for any hard drives you want to put in here, any SSDs on the back. So this is going to work pretty fine. One thing about this case, though, you cannot fit a 360 millimeter rad. You got to do like a 280. So if you want to go with an AIO, that's why I went with an air cooler. It just seemed like it would be an easier fit all around. So just something to keep in mind. So that's one case prepped. I'm going to prep the other case. This is the Be Quiet Light Base 600LX. And this is a pretty sweet looking case. I'm actually kind of excited about this. We just got this in as a test product recently, but we'll expect to roll these out to the rest of the stores soon, so you'll be able to get your hands on this. And this is another fishbowl style, but I really like this one. And this one, similar to the Fractal North, has some ridging and some aesthetic to it that I think is going to look pretty cool. So I'm actually kind of excited to try this. I haven't built in this case before. And looks like all of our components are inside in the back, so I'll just start pulling those out. Now, since we're doing two builds simultaneously, you're going to need two different magnetic part trays because things are going to start getting mixed up real fast. This is a challenge to myself to see if I can actually stay organized. Cool. All right, so both cases are open and prepped. So I'm thinking, let's start with the 7800X3D in the Fractal North, because then I can get the air cooler in, which is a Thermalright dual tower cooler. That one's gonna be pretty cool. So I have our Fractal North case set, and I'm just going to insert the motherboard now. Now this has the IO shield already built in, which is actually pretty nice. And this one's pretty easy. This one's just gonna slide. So this, you just kind of bring it in at an angle, just like that. Match it up to the back, and just match it up to the pulse holes. There we go. Cool. And everything looks good. Easy peasy. So for the cooler, like I said before, we're going with an air cooler, and we picked the Thermalright Phantom Spirit 120 SE ARGB. So this one's gonna have some RGB fans, obviously, and dual tower cooler. It's gonna keep the 7800X3D nice and cold. So I'm gonna do some of the prep work to get this one going. Now, every cooler is different. Every single cooler is different. So this is the step where I always recommend just double and triple checking the manual. Even if you are a seasoned builder, there's a lot of things that really are just the same across the board. So you can kind of just go into it and you know exactly what to do. But every once in a while, there might be a new design change that could throw you a curveball if you're not paying attention. So to save yourself the headache, I always recommend just giving a quick look through of the manual. It really goes a long way. AM4, AM5 already has the backplate pre-installed, so I'm just going to take this hardware off. And yeah, it's just going to be two brackets. Looks like the top and the bottom, and this is going to screw right on top. So pretty straightforward. First thing I'm going to do is remove the pre-installed hardware. So there are some coolers that take advantage of this hardware that comes on AM5 motherboards. I always recommend to save this hardware in the motherboard box in case things ever change, or if you have to RMA your board, or anything that comes up. You know, maybe you want to change your cooler down the line, who knows. So you definitely want to make sure you hang on to this hardware. It's just 4 screws, 2 brackets, pretty easy to lose, but also pretty easy to hang on to if you keep it in the box. So I'll put all this together over here. There we go. All right, so I got the pre-installed hardware out, and I have the hardware set here for the cooler. This one's gonna be pretty straightforward, just 4 little risers here. They just go right on the screw holes. There we go. It's gonna rest just like that. And just drop the screw right through. There we go. And this is a really nice looking dual tower. I like the clean black plates on the top too. Sometimes these fins can kind of get fingerprints on them, so I like having the plates there. And of course, the most important part, always remove the sticker. There we go. And we have our thermal paste. I don't need to go crazy with this one. Just a nice glob right in the center. Good for me. And this one's easy peasy. Now that the brackets are set, we just line up this guy. Let's see. Yeah, that'll fit. All right, there we go. So that's all set. And then we have our 2 fans. Now this has an RGB header, and it also has the fan header as well. Also comes with this little Y cable that we can use, so we can have both of the fan headers. Just go to one, and that'll split off nicely. All right, very cool. So I have the cooler all set. Also brought up my turntable. That helps a lot with moving things around. So cooler's set, fans are set. I have both fans plugged into the fan headers. I have the RGB header plugged in for the RGB and the fans as well. Now the only RGB in this case really is going to be on the fans for the cooler, and I do have an additional fan that I could probably just install now, and this is going to be one of my exhaust fans. So I'm just going to set that one up. This one's going to be real quick and easy. Then we have all that set up. One thing I want to do now at this stage is get the power supply cables going. And I'm using a modular power supply. So the power supply that I'm using for this is the Superflower LeadX3. Now this is an ATX 3.1 power supply, 850 watt, 80 plus gold rated. Now 700 watts is the recommended wattage for the 9070, but I wanted a little more overhead and went with an 850. So this is going to give us more than enough power budget for this build. And because it's modular, things are just a lot easier to deal with because I can just get the cables in place on the motherboard now and have them run to where the power supply ends up. And it's just easier to kind of get this all going, because if this was a semi-modular, then I would have to get the power supply kind of in place now and start getting that going. And I'm going to be jumping back and forth between this build and that build, so I don't want to have to deal with that. So this is going to make things a lot easier. I have our motherboard right here, so this is our 24 pin, and there we go. That's a nice even one. I can slide this around. I know I have a mess of cables up here that I'm going to fix in a little bit. Right over here, that's going to be our EPS. So it's going to be an 8-pin and an extra 4-pin. I'll get these guys going. So I have pretty clear access For CPU power, I can just run right in. I probably should have ran this before I put the cooler in, because that's what I was talking about it getting a little bit cramped with the cooler. I skipped a step. I'm so preoccupied with thinking about both builds that I'm making it a little bit harder on myself. There we go, so that pops apart super easy. And I believe it's this square and the funny shape. So this one's going to connect right in. Cool, there we go. So now I can just pick this up. Small channel up here, I can run UPS power through. Have that prepped and set. There we go. There we go. And that'll just pull right through. Now that I fixed up the cables on the fans for the cooler and I fixed up the exhaust fan here, I'm going to work on the case cables actually, because I think I can round up this build pretty fast and then we can move on to the next build. So we have our USB front cables, which I'm just going to run through. And then over on this side, they're going to be right below the motherboard power. Now, case cables aren't that bad. They're actually pretty straightforward. And the cool thing is, now, yeah, case cables aren't that bad. Obviously, you have these little connectors, and frankly, they're actually really easy. They're really, really easy to deal with. They're not that bad. I know a lot of people don't like that step, but it's very simple. So I'm going to run these through this grommet here because the connector is going to be on that side. Now, on the back here, we have this little panel that just comes right off, so this is pretty easy. This is what our power supply is going to connect to. And I want the fan on the bottom because there's a nice mesh here with a channel for air to go through. So I want the fan pointed down to pull that air through. So I'm going to put this on just like that. Okay, so I have the plate on the power supply now. And what I can do next is I can take all my power cables. I'm just going to run them straight through the back here. And I can just start plugging them in because then I can just shimmy it right into the case and it's good to go. Now, one thing I want to call out, since I'm getting all of the cables ready for the power supply, this 9070, which is the Power Color Hellhound edition, this one only has two 8-pin connectors, so that's going to be really easy. I have plenty of 8-pin cables ready for this, and yeah, I'm just going to get those cables run, but that's all I need. All right, very cool. So we've made a lot of progress, and we got this done actually pretty quickly. I did run into a quick issue because I wanted to rerun the cables for these 3 fans here. It was becoming kind of a rat's nest at the top, so I redid that. So that set me back just a little bit, but everything's set. I mean, this build was streamlined, very easy to do. Now, all we have to do is get our RX 9070 inside this guy. One quick thing that I do want to call out though, the cables for this power supply, it came with 8-pin VGA cables, right? So that's going to be for your GPU. Now, on a lot of power supplies, you'll notice that your 8-pin will come with this little pigtail extra 8-pin here. There's 2 8-pins on the GPU, so if you plug both of those in, you would think that that would be what you need, right? Well, these 8-pins are actually only rated for about 150 watts for each one. So this is 150 watts, and this is 150 watts. TDP of the RX 9070 is about 220 watts, and maybe it can pull a little bit higher with some of the other cards that are going to be out there, like some of the other brand flavors where they overclock them a little bit out of the factory. But regardless, you don't want to draw more than 150 watts out of each 8-pin. So just something to keep in mind. You see this, just ignore the pigtail. There's certain use cases where these do come in handy, but for the most part, ignore that. You want to make sure that you have one dedicated for each 8-pin for your GPU. And if your GPU has 3 8-pins, then you want to make sure that you have one 8-pin for each one of those. So something to keep in mind. With all of that set, I'm just going to take off the brackets back here and we're just going to get our GPU in place. And this is a 2-slot card. It's not that big, but I did put this up against a Fractal Terra because I was curious if that was going to fit in a small form factor build. At least this one, there's like maybe a millimeter when I was kind of fitting it in to see if it would fit in there, and it's too snug for my taste. I don't have the exact measurements of this card. I can go look it up, but this one wasn't going to fit in a small form factor. There might be other variants that will fit into a small form factor, so that's something that we'll look into, and we'll make a video about a small form factor with this GPU because I think that'll be pretty cool. But this one fits in perfectly. Let me just get this guy in place, and we'll just push that right down, and there we go. All in all, this one was very streamlined. So this was the roughly $1,500 build, and all in, it's pretty simple. You know, 2 intake fans that come with a Fractal North, and each one is 140 millimeters. I have 1 exhaust, that's a 120. This is still going to be kind of like a positive pressure situation, not like a balanced air pressure, but frankly, the air cooler for the 7800 X3D, it's going to keep it nice and cool. 3 fans on the GPU, and I have no expectation of this GPU running too hot either. So in terms of thermal performance of what you're going to get inside this case, I think you're going to be just fine. And I'm just going to run our cables in. Clip this together, there we go. All right, so that's 1, that's 2. Cool. Really all that's left is just a little bit of tidying, and we are basically done. I'm going to pull all the extra slack that we don't need. Let's pull that right underneath. For these, I'm going to let them kind of hang loose at the bottom under this shroud. I'm not going to tie them down. I'm not putting any spinning drives in this, so they can just kind of sit in this area. But all in all, everything's very easy, and it looks clean, it looks nice. Let's get it closed up. Got our top piece. And the pigtail, I will fix that a little bit later. I got a zip tie for that. Cool. So that is 1 down. 1 more to go. I am not going to post this just yet. I actually want to post them both simultaneously, so we'll get into that. But I think for now, not bad. Let's take a look. I think it looks pretty good. All right, I'm going to get set up for the next build, and we're going to wrap that one up too. Cool. I have so many cameras to look at, I don't even know where to start. So now that we are done with the first build, we're gonna move on to the next build. Now where we left off was prepping the motherboard. The motherboard's all prepped and ready to go inside. And this is gonna be pretty streamlined. All of the fans are already built into this case, which I like to see. I always appreciate having that. That's actually a really good quality of life feature, to be perfectly honest, because it's one less step that we'll have to do. Motherboard goes right in because this is a nice and roomy case. So we're just gonna rip right into this. I've got everything prepped. And the first build was pretty seamless because frankly, the amount of work was very minimal. This one, I'm actually expecting to be pretty quick as well. It's just the AIO that's gonna take a minute with some of the cables there. But again, it's gonna go by pretty fast. Right, so that is all set, and now I'm just gonna move on. One thing I wanna do is actually just get the power supply cables running. So I have that open already, and I'm just gonna plug these right into the motherboard and then push it right into the back. So that's one less thing that I have to worry about. Now, this Corsair power supply, I really like this because this has a little cable organizer right there. It's kind of like a cable comb, but it's already pre-installed for you, so this is going to look a lot neater coming out of your motherboard. So I'll show you this. Look at that. So when that comes around, that's going to look so much better. Same thing for the GPU cables. They have some combs pre-installed, so those will look nice. CPU power doesn't have that, but frankly it doesn't need it. And it's going to be 2 full 8 pins for the CPU. There we go, so that's one. And that's going to be number 2. And we got that out of the way. So there's a lot more going on in this case. This case obviously has 3 intake fans, 1 exhaust fan, all pre-installed. Also has a little fan controller as well for all of those fans, and that is also pre-installed. The back. Oh, whoops. Yeah, see, that's why I've got the turntable. As these cases get bigger and bigger and heavier, it's just a pain having to turn them around so much because you got to work on the front, you got to work on the back. Actually, this glass comes off, doesn't it? No, this one's screwed in place. I'm going to leave it there then. I can work around that easy. So obviously, the first build, about $1,500. This build, about $2,500. So where's some of that money going? Obviously, a lot of it's going to be going to performance between the CPU. The GPU is going to be a little bit, I mean, not that much more, but a little bit more than the 9070 with that 9070 XT. Some of that money's going towards the memory as well, but that's a really good memory kit. And then when it comes to a case, when you're spending a little more money on a case, what you're getting is access to a bunch of quality of life features that make building just so much easier. I can just dive right into the AIO portion, and after that, I mean, this is going to be pretty streamlined. Get the AIO going, do some cable management with all of that, power supply, that's it. I mean, this is also going to be very, very quick. But your AIO, it's one of those steps that can add just a little bit of time to your build, depending on the complexity of everything. They all have different cables and needs and different mounting hardware. For the AIO, we are going with the IQ Link Titan 360 RX, and this is the LCD variant. This one's actually pretty cool. I'm looking forward to using this one because we've been using a lot of LCD AIOs here at the studio. So I'm actually kind of excited to try this one out. I haven't tried it just yet, and this is from Corsair. So this is going to match really well with our Corsair RAM. Let's get this all set up. And for this one, since I'm doing the rad directly onto the case, I can use these short screws. It comes with short screws or long screws, depending on the length of what you have to put in there. But these are just simple short screws with a washer. And AIOs always take a little bit of effort to put on. So I have the pump just kind of sitting at the base of the case inside. I'm just going to do the rad. Start with the corners so at least I can lock it in place, and then I'll get the other screws on to hold it. But this requires me to at least hold the radiator in place while I do all of this. There we go. So I got 2 corners in. Now I can kind of let go. So for this build, I went with an AIO because the 9950X has a much higher TDP than the 7800X3E. 9950X has a 170 watt TDP, while the 7800X3D only 105 watts. So for this one, AIO is going to do us really well for keeping this 9950X nice and cool. Not to say that an air cooler couldn't do that for the 9950X, but for this build, it's also a little bit about the aesthetics, so I think that's going to play into it. But for the other build, frankly, just an air cooler at that price point, that's really all you need, especially with that CPU. Now that I have the radiator in place, all that's left to do is to mount the pump onto here. So I'm going to take the plastic piece off, and this already has thermal paste pre-applied, so I don't have to worry about any of that. And these are just going to pop right out. And this is the AM5 bracket, so this just slides right in. Really simple installation, to be honest. There we go. Let's make sure those are in really well. I'm gonna have the pumps on the side. going to match up. And then we just start threading this right in. You're going to do a star pattern. So start with one corner, alternate, and just keep alternating. That way you get equal pressure across the board. And that pre-applied thermal paste, that'll get you really good coverage on the CPU. Looking good. Got some fingerprints on the LCD there, but I'll clean that up. All right, so now that everything else is in place with the rad, there's gonna be a bunch of cables to put. I got a couple things set up. I have a cable running from the AIO pump to the radiator. I also have a USB-C, which goes to USB, which I'm gonna run back and around. That's gonna plug in at the bottom. And it's gonna pass through on the radiator to this other IQ-Link cable, which I'm gonna run to the back to this fan hub. Now this hub's gonna control everything, and I've got our power set up, another USB, and a little fan header cable connected as well. But one thing I do wanna call out though that I really like, this does come with a Y splitter for a USB header, which is really nice because once you start getting into these radiators with LCD screens, all these extra features, you start running out of USB headers really fast on these motherboards. So having a splitter that comes with it is a big, big help. So that's really nice. Now, I have all of that set. I'm gonna run this cable. I'm gonna have to stand this up now. Now, both of these USBs, I am going to take advantage of this USB splitter, and I'm going to run them both here. It's a little messy back here, but we're gonna take care of that in just a few. But that should just about do it for the AIO. I'll get this fan header running. Very close to done, believe it or not. We're very, very, very close to done. This is actually really awesome. You know, even though this has been 2 builds simultaneously, this has been very streamlined, to be honest. And I think a lot of it has to come down to the quality of life things that come with these cases. Building is very, very simple. I mean, this really is just like putting together Lego. And even doing 2 back-to-back like this, I mean, it's been a little bit much because it was getting kind of messy on the desk over there with all the parts. But otherwise, like, it's pretty fine. Especially having a case like this where everything is just kind of pre-done for you, especially when it comes to installed fans. That just makes life so much easier. You know, these case cables, pretty straightforward. And something I always like to see, a unified front panel connector. So this, everything about this, so easy. So easy. You love to see it. I want to run both the USBs here. Now, one thing I noticed before, okay. So USB 3 is on the bottom on this motherboard, and USB-C is on the side right below the motherboard power. So I thought I saw that. I just wanted to double check. Layouts for motherboards are generally the same across brands. And I say generally, you know, when it comes to power and a few other things, but some connectors are not always going to be in the same place. USB 3.0 header and USB-C headers are usually underneath the motherboard power, but in a lot of cases, I've seen them on the bottom. And this one has an extra HDMI that's actually on the board there. So if you want to have anything showing inside your case, it's kind of nice. All right, so I have our power supply right here. This is a Corsair RM1000X. This is a platinum rated power supply. So that's gonna be great. 1000 watts, again, a lot of headroom there for that 9070 XT. We don't need 1000 watts exactly, but again, between the CPU and GPU, I just want to have some extra headroom. That 9950X, it will pull some juice, and pair that off with this GPU. It'll just be nice to have some extra headroom available. And I'm going to bring out some of the extra cables because we're going to need that too. There's going to be some SATA power needs. There's a little ledge here for the power supply to live on, so that could just go right in. I have everything all set, everything's wired up, just doing finishing touches on my cable management here. I'm going to clean a little more in a second. I just got everything wired up. Now I'm pulling through. I have 1, 2, and this is number 3. 3 8-pin connectors for our GPU, because just like with the 9070, the 9070 XT uses the 8-pin connectors, and in this case there are 3 8-pin connectors, so very straightforward. And these have these pre-installed combs on them, so it's going to look nice and clean. Now let's get back over here. Let's find a home for our controller so we can get that into place. All right, so that's it. I got everything installed. This was actually really easy to set up. All in all, I really like building in this case. Everything was very simple. Got the cables all managed. Everything's wired up. And the last thing to do is going to be our GPU. Now, with the 9070, we have 3 8-pins here, and that's all it needs. I have 3 8-pins already wired through, ready to go, so we can drop this guy right in. I'll take these brackets off, and I can slot this guy right into the case. Look at that. Oh yeah, that looks great. And that matches really nicely with this motherboard too. It's looking pretty nice. I'm really happy with this. So now the last thing to do is to plug in all of the GPU power cables. And this one's going to be real straightforward. Again, just 3 8-pins. You want to make sure that you're using 8-pins that are not daisy chained through. You don't want to use the pigtails. You want to use dedicated 8-pins to your power supply. There we go. Look at that. Oh, there we go. Now I can use these combs to sort of pull it back and make this look nice and neat. Yeah, pre-installed combs are just so nice. Makes the cable management way easier. And for this guy, I could have gone with more fans on the bottom, but I think we're looking pretty okay. We have 3 intake over here, 1 exhaust, and obviously exhausting through the AIO. So I wouldn't call it balanced air pressure, but for the most part, it's pretty good. Move this cable up a little bit. And I'll make some last minute adjustments, you know, just for aesthetic's sake, but we're ready to post. So why don't we dive into this? But first things first, I have to get I'm gonna get the panels on. All right, there we go. She's all set. So now the only thing to do, let's get both PCs set up and let's see if they both post. Well, there you have it. Both of them are built, and let's see if they post. I'll power this one up. Power this one up as well. Look at that. We've got RGB on for this guy. Here, I'll turn it over a little bit. Oh, there we go. Looking good. All across the board. I really like that startup animation. We already actually have the LCD working. That's actually really nice. Just right off the bat, I can just see my temps. All the RGBs firing up. Everything's kind of going there. Oh, see RGB popping up in the GPU as well. You know what? While this is booting, do that. That just looks great. Let's do this one next. All right, so I see a green light here. Looks like it's still training the memory there. So you have to keep in mind 64 gigabytes of memory on this one, and it's going to take a minute for it to train all that memory. This one looks like it should pop up any second now. All right, there we go. Look at that. Both posted, both good to go. Nice. I'm actually really happy with myself. I got this done in a pretty good amount of time. It took me about 2 hours, but that's only because we had a couple of interruptions and I had to stop for a minute. But all in all, I'm actually really happy with the way that these builds came out. Now, our $1,500 build here, the only RGB you're gonna get is gonna be on the cooler right there, but I think it looks really nice. Let's see what we got. Yep, everything's there. Cool, in the BIOS for this one, in the BIOS for this one, and we're looking good. I really like the way our $1,500 build came out. Only RGB you're gonna get is gonna be on the cooler itself, but I actually think it looks really nice. A case like this, I think understated is really the way to go. Just a little bit of RGB just so you can see inside. And obviously you can't see inside too well because it is tinted a little bit. But over here, I actually left the plastic on the internal part of the glass. I'll take that off later when we get some B-roll, but you can see very clearly, this looks really nice. Obviously we have to get all the drivers installed and everything else so we can get all of the RGB configured, which I'll be doing in just a minute. So I'm gonna get Windows installed and let's see how they look. So everything's wrapped up. I got Windows installed last night and I'm actually really happy with the way these builds came out. So obviously this is our $1,500 RX 9070 build, and this is our $2,500 RX 9070 XT build, and both of which I'm very proud of. I've actually never built two PCs at the same time, so I gotta say the process wasn't as bad as I thought it was gonna be. Now I'm wondering, can I do 3 PCs simultaneously? That might be a new video. Maybe AMD will release 3 GPUs simultaneously next. Anyway, so this one actually came out really nice. Big fan of the Fractal North case. Obviously you have the wood accents here on the front with these wood slats. Also have the nice gold accents here on the top. And this is just a really nice clean case that makes a really good showpiece that I'm very happy with the way it came out. And you can see the RGB on the cooler pops through a little bit, but it's not in your face RGB, unlike our $2,500 build where it's a lot of RGB, but I like it a lot. Cooler actually looks really nice. That LCD screen, programmable, so you can put whatever you want on there. But I have to call out this Be Quiet case. Again, this has the ridges similar to the Fractal North, because if you take a look at the top here, you have this ridging on the mesh. But you also have these ridges here with the RGB strips going all the way, top, front, and even underneath, so you get a little underglow as well. So this came out really nice. This is a really nice dual chamber case. Plenty of room to build in, a lot of extra features and functionality that you can do. You can add all the other things that you want in the back. It looks like there's 2 sets of fan controllers inside as well, because there's one on the top that was pre-wired and there's a second one on the bottom. So you can go all in and just use both of those controllers. So I think that about wraps it up for this video. We really wanted to focus more on the builds for both of these GPUs, and I gotta say, I'm very happy with the way that they came out. You can get yourself an awesome build like this on March 6th when these GPUs launch, and you can get them at 9 a.m. Eastern, 6 a.m. Pacific at your local microcenter. And remember, if you don't have a microcenter near you, to comment #IWantAMicrocenter near me.